Hey there, how there, ho there. It's Jeff Diamond, Cutter Diamond, welcoming you to yet another Cutter Top 10 video about sports. Today we're going to look at the top 10 NCAA basketball teams of all time. I did football, now I got to do basketball. So basketball is a little bit different than football, with the fact that there are more teams in the what they call the IA, or the top division. In football, you got like 130 teams. And in basketball, you got like 300 because you got lots of conferences and lots of teams that try to compete for the NCAA tournament, but they're not in the competing for NCAA football glory. These 10 teams have won the championship and have been a very fantastic set of squads and all that, with the whole thing called squad goals and all that. So we'll see what happens. So there were a couple of top tens entries I did have to change course on because of the whole thing with a lot of things. But anyway, here we go. Number 10 on the list is the 1983 Cardiac Wolfpack. The NC State program was big in 1974, winning the NCAA championship by beating UCLA in the semifinals and ruining their 7 straight NBA championships. Sorry, what am I thinking? NCAA championships. And David Thompson. North Carolina State fell back into mediocrity, and by 1983, Jim Valvano was a pretty good coach, but NC State were just a ragtag team. They essentially had to win the ACC tournament just to get an at-large bid because, contrary to popular belief, it was not a 64-team tournament back in 1983. It was a 48-team tournament, and practically they knew that if they won the conference tournament, they had to get a spot. So they did. They beat Virginia with Ralph Sampson and co. And then they had a tough time with Pepperdine in the first round and beat them. NC State went on an amazing run to the final against Houston with Faisal Majama, with Michael Young, Hakeem Olajuwon, and Clyde Drexler on the squad. The Wolfpack used the slow down offense to make sure Houston's fast break was hit hard. It ended up being 51-51 with a minute left. NC State decided to hold for the ball. Now, at that time, there was no shot clock. Unlike the NBA, who had the 24-second shot clock in 1955, college basketball had no shot clock whatsoever. So NC State decided to hold on to the ball. And then Dirk Wittenberg heaved up a 25-footer, which missed everything, even the rim. But Lorenzo Charles got the ball and slammed it down. Because it did not hit the rim, it was deemed an alley-oop and illegal play by Lorenzo Charles, who makes it, and the Wolfpack shocked everyone by having double-digit losses throughout the regular season, but yet they won the NCAA championship when it counted. And poor Houston, the Cougars have never won a NCAA tournament. Anyway, number 9 is another underdog team, the 1985 Villanova Wildcats. Of course, the year of my birth, and I was born 8 days after the title game for Villanova. But Villanova were a plucky team out of the Big East, and the Big East shocked a lot of people by bringing 3 teams to the Final Four. So the Final Four had 3 Big East teams, and this was the first year that the tournament expanded from 48 to 64 teams. So the 1985 Wildcats had a tough time in the Big East because they had to deal with St. John's and Georgetown. Georgetown bringing Patrick Ewing back for his senior season because he promised his mom he would graduate as a senior. And everyone was salivating over who would win the draft lottery to get Patrick Ewing. And of course, we all know the next did. So the 85 Wildcats were big and all that. They had a good run, and then they got to the finals against said Hoyas. Well, of course, St. John's also was there too in the Final Four. And the only team that was not Big East in the Final Four was Memphis State. Well, it's called Memphis now. But anyway, yeah, the Wildcats did something amazing. Their shot accuracy was out of this world, 78%. Can you imagine? Teams usually can't do 60% from the field with their shots, but Villanova did a near perfect game, 78%. They were just flawless and all that with their shot making and all that. And of course, this was before the shot clock came in the next season, but Villanova did what they could. They beat Georgetown, ruining Patrick Ewing's chances for back-to-back titles. Well, Georgetown did win the 1984 championship, but yeah, Villanova did it. And they were the Cardiac Cats, the number 8 seed, the lowest seed to win in the 64 team plus team tournament. I know there were 68 teams, but Anyway, that's it. Number 8 is the Reading Rebels of UNLV, 1990. UNLV was led by Coach Jerry Tarkanian, known as Tark the Shark. They had an explosive offense and intimidating defense, winning 35 of a possible 40 games. They were huge. They had 3 future NBA stars in the 1990s: Larry Johnson, or Grandmama, as he's known for in the commercials, as a Hornet and Nick, helping the Knicks as the 8 seed make it to the 1999 finals against the Spurs. Stacey Augmon, who was a serviceable guy for the Detroit Pistons, among others, and Greg Anthony, who was a good Knicks/Vancouver Grizzly. UNLV had their high-octane fast break style, akin to Loyola Marymount, but unfortunately Loyola Marymount did not make the Final Four. And of course, this was the year that Hank Gathers collapsed and died, because Loyola Marymount had the same type of running style as UNLV did. So UNLV crushed Duke by 30 points in the championship game. It was like amazing, and still holds the modern record. The funny thing was the 91 squad could have been better because they were nearly flawless. Unfortunately, they fell to Duke in the semifinals, who got revenge. And then the next year, UNLV got booted because of a postseason ban because of some improper benefits. Number 7 is the 1968 UCLA Bruins. For me, the 1968 Bruins were big. They were 29-1, and they were looking massive and all that. They were looking for the repeat. They were a decent team. They won in 64 and 65, lost in 66. That went to Texas Western, aka UTEP, who had the all-black starting lineup, and it was one for the ages. 1967 they won, and then in 1968 they were 29-1. Their one loss was a major one because it was a nationally televised game against the Houston Cougars with their big star, Big E Elvin Hayes. UCLA star Lou Alcindor, soon to be called Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, was battling an eye issue and couldn't shoot that well. In front of a sellout crowd at the Astrodome, I don't know why you would put a college basketball game in the middle of the Astrodome, because it was so massive for baseball and for football. But yeah, they played there. Houston beat UCLA, but UCLA had a chance for redemption against the Cougars in the Final Four, which they did. They took advantage. They're like, you know what, we'll get you back. And then UCLA had won every title, would win every title until 1974. Number 6 is the 1992 Duke Blue Devils. They won the title in 91. They took out a big favorite, as in UNLV, and then took out Kansas to get their chance to the championship. The 92 team only lost twice out of 36 games. Mike Krzyzewski was a great coach. Christian Laettner was a leader with Grant Hill and Bobby Hurley. Now, Laettner would be serviceable for the Timberwolves and the Wizards, among other teams. Grant Hill was a Detroit Pistons icon before injuring himself and then going to Orlando, and then was really injury prone. And Bobby Hurley, who unfortunately suffered, I believe he was the one who suffered a massive car crash which ruined his confidence, but not when he was for the Sacramento Kings. But the fact of the matter was that those 3 guys were huge and all that. Duke was trying to go back to back, which was rarely done. I believe UCLA was the last team to do so. Duke actually had to play Kentucky in one of the greatest NCAA tournament games of all time, in the regional final, or the Elite Eight, if you will. They had to play Kentucky at the Spectrum in Philadelphia. It was 102-101 Kentucky, and then for some reason, Kentucky did not guard the inbound pass, as Grant Hill, using his baseball skills, threw it to Christian Laettner, who caught it between 2 defenders, had the presence of mind to dribble a couple times, and then shoot as the buzzer hit Cyril and made the bucket, and Duke eliminated Kentucky and then would go on to win the title against the Michigan Wolverines. It was just amazing and all that. Number 5 is my favorite team, my favorite college, and that's Arkansas. The 1994 Arkansas Razorbacks. Pigs, suey, Razorbacks, woo! Sorry, I'm a little biased, but hey, I think that the 1994 Razorbacks were huge because Arkansas kept being a decent team that popped up and did some great runs, especially in 1981, taking out the defending national champions Louisville in the second round thanks to a U.S. Reed buzzer beater, which was on the same day as Kansas State's Rolando Blackman, soon to be a serviceable NBA guy, scoring a bucket to beat Oregon State, who are number 2 in the nation, and also the day that DePaul fell to a very inferior St. Joe's team. But yeah, the 94 Razorbacks were big. Nolan Richardson knew what to do and play hogball. 48 minutes of bruising offense, baggy shorts, big nasty Corliss Williamson in the paint and all that. You knew they were going to make it. And, the 94 Razorbacks took care of Duke, and Mike Krzyzewski won the title, the only national title in basketball in Razorbacks history. They went back in 95, lost to UCLA, which kind of pisses me off. But of course, the 94 Razorbacks is the reason why I cheer for the Razorbacks and no other college. I was 9 years old when I got to watch the NCAA tournament for the first time. It was on a specialty channel called City TV, which serviced Toronto and all that. But they would simulcast CBS's NCAA coverage. And Arkansas was the first winner, the first champion. And I decided to be a Razorback fan for both basketball and football. Number 4 is the 1982 North Carolina Tar Heels. They had a good chance in 84 to be better, but unfortunately they fell in the NCAA tournament. So we have to talk about the title holders. So the 82 Tar Heels were massive. They had youth and experience. They had 3 iconic players of the 80s and 90s on their team. They had Sam Perkins, a reliable center who would be good with the Lakers on other team, and the Sonics. James Worthy, who wasn't that bad at all, and the Lakers drafted him first overall with a pick they took from Cleveland when Cleveland decided to trade their number 1 pick. James Worthy, big game James, as they call it, 1 year, 1 team, and that was the Lakers. And this freshman by the name of Michael freaking Jordan. Nobody knew at the time that how good Michael Jordan would have been, but he was a freshman. He was an icon and all that. And, that was amazing for North Carolina. They faced Georgetown, one of the greatest NCAA finals of all time. And Michael took a 17-foot jumper to make it 63-62. But then Georgetown had a chance. But unfortunately, Fred Brown, the guard, passed to the wrong guy, thinking he was passing it to Sleepy Floyd, but it was to James Worthy, who dribbled down the clock, if you will. It was an iconic game-winning shot, and MJ bloomed a bit in a couple more years in college and all that. So, hard to believe. Okay, number 3 is the last undefeated team in NCAA tournament history, the 1976 Indiana Hoosiers. Bob Knight was a good coach when he was in a happy mood. When he was in a grumpy mood, watch out. Chairs across the free throw line, cursing at reporters, allegedly taking out a bullwhip at a thing. But anyway, yeah, the 76 Hoosiers were amazing. They were 32-0. There have been many times there was a chance to be undefeated. Gonzaga in 2021 during the COVID year had a chance to go undefeated and win the national title, but they lost to Baylor. Baylor of all freaking teams. I hate them. But the fact of that is Indiana had the perfect blend of discipline, teamwork, and talent. They were close in 1975, losing to Kentucky in the Final Four. But then Scott May, Quinn Buckner, and Kent Benson just basically were big players. I mean, they didn't really have NBA careers. I mean, Kent Benson was okay for Milwaukee, but he wasn't the thing. But anyway, their wire consistency is the measuring stick that everyone has to try to beat and all that. Number 2 is the 1996 Kentucky Wildcats. They were called the Untouchables because Kentucky, was this big college program that hadn't won a title since 1978. They were basically suffering the blues and all that, kind of like UCLA did. UCLA had not won a title since John Wooden retired in 1975, and then in 1995, or did they win a title in 1980? Or I think they went to the final. But yeah, in 1995, they finally did it. But Kentucky's like, if they could do it, why can't we? So they did it. They were 34-2, steamrolling through the regular season and the NCAA tournament. They had some NBA talent. Tony Delk, Anton Walker, and Walter McCarty. McCarty wasn't really that big of a guy. Tony Delk was decent for both Charlotte and Boston. And Anton Walker was the first key piece for Boston to fix their problems with Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett on their way. But anyway, they had a pressing defense, a deep bench. It was nearly impossible to beat. Kentucky actually when you face facts, they had 6 games from the round of 64 to the final. Only 1 game was decided by single digits. They crushed Syracuse in the final, who were making their own thing with John Wallace, soon to be Nick and Raptor. But anyway, that's what happened. And number one, no doubt, it's a UCLA team, but it's the 1972 team, the gold standard. UCLA was just pure hectic. In the late 60s, early 70s, you hated to face UCLA because they could beat you anyway from sundown. And they basically made a run of 7 straight titles, akin to the Celtics winning 8 straight titles in the 60s. But the fact of the matter is that UCLA looked good. They were 30-0, their sixth national title. Bill Walton was a sophomore, and he used his defense, unselfish offense, and pure athleticism. Of course, there were other players. And this was after Kareem Abdul-Jabbar graduated. Abdul-Jabbar was in the NBA with Milwaukee. And the 71-72 Bruins started what would be the largest winning streak in NCAA men's history with 88 games played. So can you imagine going through 88 straight games undefeated? It's hard to get to 30, much less 88. So, like, Bill Walton said, I could do whatever I want. And the UCLA squad followed through. And, they're the gold standard. So sue me. Anyhow, I'm Jeff Diamond. Adieu.